So since the Hamas attacks on Israel on October 7th, Israel has, in response to that, carried out an incessant and indiscriminate bombardment of besieged Gaza. It has ordered a siege on the territory. It has withheld supplies. It is not letting water, food, or power enter into Gaza. And it is also imposing an unlawful blockade, which it has actually been imposing for the last 16 years. So as part of that, in withholding these supplies, in forcibly then ordering an evacuation and forcibly displacing people, it is intentionally starving the civilian population of Gaza. In violation of the laws of war. That is in and of itself a war crime, and that is done as a method of warfare. And it is being done intentionally in order to collectively punish the people of Gaza for the actions of Hamas. And that is entirely seen in the statements that we're seeing out of Israeli spokesmen and their defense minister when they're talking about the people of Palestine as human animals, and they wanted hell, so we're going to give them hell. And they've been talking about how we're going to give them a Nakba, the like of which they've never seen in 1948 even, one that will overshadow what was there in 1948. So when you see these statements, and especially Daniel Hagari, who then has come out saying that Israel did not bomb the Al-Ahli hospital. Well, a few days ago, he was the one who was saying that the emphasis is going to be on damage. It's not going to be on accuracy. So Israel has really tried to push the deterrent value in their political rhetoric, but it is one which indicates that they're not following international law at all. And the ICRC recently published a public statement on this. The ICRC is known for keeping it very, very confidential, how it interacts with states, and publicly they called for the fact that whatever happened on October 7th, it is not going to be possible to justify the limitless destruction of Gaza, which Israel is conducting currently. But there is a pharaonic military asymmetry between these two parties. So when Israel talks about the annihilation of Gaza, it is one that it can undertake because it has such military supremacy, technological prowess over the Palestinians in this instance, and it is also supplemented by American and British support in that sense. And even when we're looking at, in other terms, about the asymmetry between these two sides, the per capita GDP in Israel is 55,000 USD per year. And when you look at it on the other side, just a few hours away, just a few kilometers away even, in the Gaza Strip, it goes down to $1,250 a year in per capita income. And so the asymmetry in every which way you look at it, these are 2 million civilians who are living in an open air prison and who are entirely dependent on the occupying power, which is Israel, to supply them with water, food, and power. And this is something that was acknowledged even by the Israeli High Court itself, that the IDF has this duty to supply the civilian population of Gaza with water, with food, with power. And the fact that in the 2007 war, you had Israel counting the calories that would be going in food supplies into Gaza, it just indicates the fact that you cannot compare like with like in this instance. And yet you have one side which is given such support by the international community and the other side is left with nothing. Yeah, so this is one of the very, very rare instances where you have the International Criminal Court having jurisdiction over the offense. We had a previous ICC prosecutor, a Ghanaian lady called Fatou Bensouda, who was very, very bold in trying to hold powerful states to account, including America and Afghanistan, and including Israel in its actions in the occupied Palestinian territories. So this is an investigation which is ongoing since 2014, and in 2021, the pre-trial chamber, a chamber of 3 judges, decided that they did have jurisdiction. So now the investigation has been ongoing since 2021. And this has been highly controversial. It was contested and criticized by the US and of course Israel, both of which are not state parties. But because the acts in Israel are linked to those in the occupied Palestinian territories, the ICC has jurisdiction over all of that. The sad thing is that unlike what we saw with the Ukraine crisis, where you had a team of 42 investigators, forensic experts, and support staff immediately sent to Ukraine to investigate Russian war crimes, you have nothing of the sort happening in Palestine. You also had there 45 states pledging funding, coordination, technology of their own in terms of investigating Russian war crimes. You had very high-profile arrest warrants come out immediately for of Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Russian Commissioner on the Rights of Children. And yet we're not really seeing that here. We have a current prosecutor who is British Pakistani, Karim Khan, and it is a question of priorities. He took 3 days to respond to what was happening in Gaza. And he has, already mentioned the fact that, I hope I could make a visit to Palestine in 2023. He has talked about how he doesn't have enough funding. He has a very, very small team in Palestine. Actually, there was no team until 2021. They were having an investigation without any kind of legal team there. So it is minimally staffed and under-resourced, and whether a team like that can actually investigate Israeli war crimes is the real question. But even outside from what we see with the ICC, states do enjoy what they call universal jurisdiction over war crimes, which means that any war crime occurring anywhere in the world can be tried in your national courts. And Belgium and Germany have really been taking the forefront of this in investigating Syrian war criminals. And so the same could be done in terms of Israel whenever these IDF commanders, whenever these people who are involved in these war crimes, whenever they travel to these countries, they could be indicted, they could be arrested, and they could be sentenced. So the push really for accountability has to be through the ICC and putting pressure on them to investigate Palestine, but also through universal jurisdiction. So under international law as well, much has been made of the fact that Israel has the right to self-defense against the attacks of Hamas. But in fact, what we would argue is that it is occupied territory, and in fact, an occupied territory constitutes an ongoing armed attack, and so Hamas would actually have the right to self-defense against that. And even incidentally, the Palestinians being under a brutal Israeli occupation, which forcibly denies them their right to self-determination, they have the right to resist, and they even have the right to seek moral and material assistance from other states in exercising that right. And that right was crystallized during the era of decolonization, and it is found codified in a number of General Assembly resolutions. So whenever everyone is talking about Israel's right to self-defense, we argue that no, in fact, the Palestinians are the ones who have the right to resist. And in fact, the occupation constitutes an ongoing armed attack against which it is the Palestinians which have the right to self-defense.